My daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye and said, "You either change your will or you'll regret it." Her voice was calm, controlled, almost polite. That's what frightened me the most. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't even flinch. I just nodded slowly, picked up the pen she slid across the table, and signed. She smiled triumphant, satisfied, convinced she had just won. What she didn't know was that I had spent more than 4 decades preparing for moments exactly like this. And the fine print she hadn't bothered to read would change everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you what happened when she finally read that document, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and, in the comments, tell me what time it is where you're watching from right now. Because this story isn't just about money. It's about entitlement, about patience, and about what happens when people underestimate an old man who knows exactly what he's doing. The dining room felt colder than usual that night. Not because of the early October rain tapping against the windows of my home in Eugene, Oregon, but because of the silence sitting between us. My son, Andrew, sat across the table, pushing roasted potatoes around his plate as if they might explain what he couldn't bring himself to say. His wife, Vanessa, had no such hesitation. "Leonard," she said, setting her fork down with deliberate care. "Not Dad, not Mr. Caldwell. Just Leonard, like I was a guest who had overstayed his welcome. We need to talk about the house." I took a slow sip of water and let the moment stretch. 42 years as a corporate compliance consultant had taught me something valuable. People reveal more when you let them talk. "This house has 5 bedrooms," I said evenly. 2 offices, a finished basement, plenty of space. Vanessa laughed, sharp and dismissive. "That's exactly the problem." Andrew's shoulders stiffened, but he stayed quiet. "You take up too much of it," she continued. "Andrew and I are trying to plan for our future. Careers, a family, stability." She paused, eyes narrowing just enough to make her point unmistakable. "Maybe it's time you considered other living arrangements." The words hung in the air. "Other arrangements?" I asked. She leaned back, folding her arms. "There are excellent senior communities nearby. Assisted living, places with activities, medical staff, people your own age." She smiled, but there was nothing warm behind it. "You're 70 years old, Leonard. Don't you think you'd be more comfortable somewhere designed for this stage of life?" Andrew finally looked up. "Dad, she's just saying dash." "I'm saying exactly what I mean," Vanessa cut in. I set my glass down carefully. This house had been purchased by my parents in the early 1960s. I'd raised Andrew here. My late wife, Eleanor, had planted the maple tree out back with her own hands. I could still see her every spring, kneeling in the soil, smiling like the world was exactly as it should be. "This is my home," I said quietly. "For now," Vanessa replied, her voice dropping low. "For now it is." Andrew muttered something about emails and disappeared upstairs. I stayed seated long after Vanessa began stacking dishes with unnecessary force, the clatter echoing through the kitchen like punctuation marks. I should have gone to my study, should have let it pass. But as I reached the stairs, their voices drifted down. Vanessa's sharp, unfiltered. Andrew's weak, agreeable. "Your father is taking too long," she said. "We need access to that money now. Not when we're old. Liv, come on. He's sitting on over $1 million in assets," she snapped. "The house alone is worth nearly $900,000. That's not fair." "Fair." The words settled in my chest like ice. "What do you want me to do?" Andrew asked. "Convince him, or we make things uncomfortable. He'll move out on his own eventually." I gripped the banister. For decades, I had watched families tear themselves apart over inheritance. I'd advised executives, trustees, and attorneys on how to protect assets from entitlement. I never imagined I'd need those skills in my own home. But that night, sitting alone in my study as the rain finally stopped, I understood something clearly for the first time. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't stress. It wasn't impatience. It was a plan, and I was done being passive in my own life. I opened a yellow legal pad, the same kind I'd used my entire career, and wrote one word at the top. Documentation. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but with the calm precision of a man who finally realized he was no longer dealing with family. but with adversaries who believed he was already halfway gone. They were wrong. 2 days after that dinner, I woke up thinking about the photo albums. That should tell you something. When you reach my age, memories don't usually ambush you first thing in the morning unless something is deeply wrong. It had been early summer when it happened. I'd gone out for my weekly breakfast with former colleagues, men who still treated me like I mattered, who still asked my opinion. When I came home, the trash bins were already at the curb. Something about the way the lids didn't quite close made me stop. I opened one. Eleanor's photo albums were inside. Every picture from our marriage. From Andrew's childhood. Birthdays. Camping trips. Sunday mornings when nothing felt urgent. All of it shoved into black garbage bags like expired food. I confronted Vanessa in the kitchen. She was blending a smoothie, earbuds in, completely unbothered. Those albums were 40 years of memories. I said, doing my best to keep my voice steady. She didn't even pause the blender. They were taking up space in the hallway closet. Moldy old books full of people who aren't even around anymore. Andrew had been in the garage. I found him there afterward, holding a box he didn't need to be holding. She said, "You agreed." I told him. He didn't look at me. "We needed storage, Dad. You never even looked at them." I rescued what I could from the bins. Most of the photos survived. My understanding of my son did not. Now, sitting at my desk days after the dinner confrontation, I added that incident to my legal pad. Dates, details, exact words. Patterns matter. So did the incident last month when I asked Vanessa to help me reach a box on the top pantry shelf. My back had been acting up. Nothing dramatic, just age reminding you it's still in the room. She stared at me like I'd insulted her. "Get a step stool," she said. "I'm not your caretaker." "I wasn't suggesting that," I replied. "I just dash. I have a life, Leonard," she snapped. "I don't exist to serve you." Andrew had been in the living room. He heard every word. He said nothing. Then there was the phone call I overheard not long after. Vanessa was in the den, talking loudly enough that the walls did nothing to soften her voice. "The old man hoards his money like it's oxygen," she laughed. "We're talking well over $500,000 in liquid assets, plus the house. And he acts like we're criminals for asking for help. They hadn't asked for help. They demanded $75,000, no repayment plan, no terms to seed Andrew's business idea. I'd suggested a formal loan, even offered to guarantee it. Vanessa had called me paranoid. I wrote that down too. Every entry sharpened the picture. On the following Thursday, I was checking the mail when my neighbor, Carol Jensen, crossed the street. Carol had taught history for 3 decades. She noticed things. "Leonard," she said warmly, "I saw Andrew and Vanessa downtown earlier this week. They were coming out of Pinecrest Realty." My hand froze on a credit card offer. Pinecrest. Yes. Tuesday afternoon. They looked very excited, talking about timelines and market conditions. I assumed they were buying an investment property. She smiled. Young people planning ahead. I managed a polite response and went inside. That real estate office specialized in quick sales. That evening, I checked the shared printer in the hallway. Andrew had used it earlier and rushed out. What he forgot was still sitting there. A preliminary property valuation. My address. Estimated market value, just over $900,000. At the top, handwritten in Vanessa's looping script. Fast sale after inheritance. I photographed it and returned it exactly where I found it. The list grew. Jake's birthday party. When I was told it might be better if I skipped it because I dominated conversations. The doctor's office calling about medication adjustments and Vanessa casually mentioning it 3 days later as if it were a grocery coupon. Each moment alone could be dismissed. Together, they formed intent. By the time I finished documenting everything, the house was quiet again. Andrew and Vanessa were upstairs, likely planning which room they'd renovate first once I was gone. I stared at the rain-darkened window of my study and felt something settle inside me. Clarity. I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't being sensitive. I wasn't difficult. I was being targeted. I opened my laptop and drafted an email to Rachel Monroe. Rachel and I had worked together for over 2 decades. She specialized in trust structures and compliance, brilliant, meticulous, incorruptible. "Rachel," I typed, "I need your help with a sensitive personal matter. I'm revising my will. It's complex and I need your expertise. Can we meet soon?" Her reply came within the hour. Saturday morning. "Bring coffee." I allowed myself a small smile. Not a happy one. The kind you get when a long game finally begins. Because estate planning isn't just about where money goes. It's about making sure it doesn't go to the wrong hands. And for the first time, I accepted the truth fully. I wasn't protecting my legacy anymore. I was preparing a lesson. By the end of that week, the house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a waiting room. Andrew and Vanessa moved around me without acknowledging my presence unless it was necessary. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Meals became silent affairs unless Vanessa needed to remind me politely, of course, that I'd forgotten to turn off a light or that my shoes were by the door. Small things, calculated things, the kind meant to erode without leaving marks. Saturday morning arrived gray and damp. Andrew and Vanessa left early, saying something vague about errands. They didn't ask if I needed anything. They never did anymore. I stood in the hallway after the door closed, listening to the echo settle. That's when I noticed it. Vanessa's laptop sat open on the bed in their room, power light glowing softly. She was careless when she felt secure. Overconfident. I stood there longer than I cared to admit. I'm not proud of what I did next. But when someone is planning to erase you, you earn the right to know how. The laptop wasn't password protected. Her email was open. I scrolled. There it was. A message thread titled, Next Steps. Pinecrest Realty. Same agent Carol had mentioned. As discussed, the agent wrote, a listing price between $900,000 and $950,000 should generate immediate interest. Given the condition and location, a sale within 30 to 45 days is realistic once listed. Vanessa's response followed. Perfect. We're not ready to list yet, but it won't be long. We'll contact you once the timing is right. Timing. Not if. When. I took screenshots with my phone, my hand steady in a way that surprised me. Then I saw another tab. A website. Silverbrook Transitional Living. I clicked. The inquiry form was already filled out. We are seeking placement options for a 70-year-old male. Generally healthy, but increasingly difficult to manage at home. Please advise on availability and pricing for shared accommodations. Shared, not private. The response detailed monthly rates. Nearly $3,000 for a shared room. Immediate availability. Vanessa's reply asked how quickly admission could be arranged. I closed the laptop carefully and stepped back into the hallway. The line had been crossed. This wasn't impatience. This wasn't entitlement. This was removal. That afternoon, I sat at my desk and transferred everything from my legal pad into a secure digital file. Screenshots, dates, quotes, context. I'd spent decades telling clients that documentation was protection. Now I understood it was also clarity. I made copies of everything important. Deeds, bank statements, my existing will. The current version split my estate between Andrew and several charities Eleanor and I had supported for years. At the time, it had felt balanced. Now I saw it through Vanessa's eyes. Insufficient. That evening, as I was filing papers, I overheard voices in the hallway outside my bedroom. Vanessa and Andrew. Lo, urgent. You need to push harder, she whispered. He's stalling. I can't just tell him to change his will, Andrew said. That's not dash. Then make him uncomfortable, she snapped. Stop accommodating him. Stop including him. Let him feel like the guest he is. Silence. Then Andrew. Okay. The next morning confirmed it. Breakfast was made for two. When I reached for a plate, Vanessa blocked me with a tight smile. We're in a rush. You'll have to handle your own. There was no appointment on the calendar. I ate alone. Later that day, another document appeared in the printer tray. A spreadsheet. Post-inheritance planning. House sale. Estimated proceeds. Luxury vehicles. Vacation property. Business investment. No education fund for Jake. No charitable giving. No contingency for me. Just allocation. I photographed it and added it to the file. That night, I lay awake listening to the house breathe. I thought about Eleanor, about the woman who had believed kindness was strength, but boundaries were necessary. By morning, my decision was complete. I emailed Rachel again. Can we move our meeting earlier? Her response was immediate. Tomorrow morning. My office. When I arrived, she took one look at me and poured coffee without asking. Tell me everything, she said. I did. Every incident, every document, every overheard conversation. When I finished, she leaned back slowly. This isn't just about money, she said. They're trying to remove you. Yes, I replied, and I want to give them exactly what they're asking for. Rachel frowned. You want to change your will? I want to change it, I said calmly, but not the way they think. Her expression shifted curiosity, replacing concern. You're building something. Yes, I said, something airtight. She smiled despite herself. Then let's make it precise. As I left her office, the rain had stopped. The air felt sharper, cleaner. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Because when people believe you're already gone, they stop watching carefully. And that's when you write the fine print. The tension didn't simmer anymore. It boiled. By the middle of the following week, Vanessa stopped pretending. She didn't hide her irritation. She didn't soften her words. The mask had slipped, and what remained was urgency sharpened by impatience. I was reading in the living room when she walked in, Andrew trailing behind her like a man already resigned to the outcome. We need to talk, she said. She didn't ask me to sit. She stood over me, arms crossed, body angled like a challenge. This is about your will. I marked my page and closed the book carefully. My will, I said, is my business. She laughed short and humorless. It stopped being just your business when you decided to leave our future tied up in paperwork and charities. Andrew shifted uncomfortably. Dad, he began, we just want Dash. What you want, Vanessa interrupted, is to stop pretending this is reasonable. She leaned forward. You have one son, one grandson. Everything you own should go to us, not to organizations that won't even remember your name. They remember Eleanor, I replied, and they do important work. Eleanor is gone, she snapped. You're investing in the past while you're living family struggles. Struggles? I asked quietly. You live here rent-free. Andrew is employed. Where's the struggle? She exhaled sharply. We want to build something. Andrew's business needs capital. Then apply for a loan, I said. I already offered to guarantee one. Banks take too much, she replied. Why should we pay interest when you're sitting on nearly $1 million you'll never use? There it was. The truth, finally unvarnished. I want clarity, I said. What exactly are you asking? Vanessa straightened. You change your will. Make Andrew your sole beneficiary. Remove the charities. No conditions. No trusts. Everything goes to him. To you. I corrected. She didn't deny it. And if I refuse? I asked. Her smile returned thin, deliberate. Then we reconsider living arrangements. My stomach tightened, but I kept my voice level. You'd move out. She tilted her head. No, we'd move you. Andrew looked up sharply. Vanessa Dash. For your own good, she continued smoothly. You're aging. What if you fall? What if you forget medication? It's irresponsible for you to live alone. I'm not alone, I said. You're here. Not for long, she replied. Not if you insist on being difficult. The word landed hard. You're threatening me? I said. I'm being realistic, she countered. Silverbrook has availability. Shared rooms. Affordable. She said it casually, as if discussing a grocery store. I felt something cold spread through my chest. I need time to think, I said. You've had time, she replied. Years. I said I need time. She stepped closer. Think carefully, because while you're thinking, remember we control access to Jake. That one hurt. Wouldn't it be a shame, she added softly, if you missed another birthday? Or if we decided a move would be best for our family? Andrew looked away. I stood. I will not make major legal decisions under threat. Her jaw tightened. Fine. Take 2 weeks. But understand this, if you don't sign, we will make this house unbearable. You'll beg to leave. I met her eyes. Noted. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Voices drifted from their bedroom. Low. Calculating. If he doesn't cave, Vanessa whispered, we escalate. Ow. Andrew asked. Adult Protective Services. Claim confusion. With the right doctors, conservatorship isn't impossible. Silence. Then Andrew's voice. That feels extreme. Extreme is wasting our lives waiting for him to die, she replied. He could live another 20 years. Another pause. If something happened naturally, she added, this would all resolve itself. I lay still in the dark. every word searing itself into memory. The next morning, I texted Rachel. We need to accelerate. Her reply came quickly. I'll clear my schedule. 2 days later, Vanessa handed me a document across the kitchen table. A will. Amateur formatting. Generic language. Everything to Andrew and Vanessa. Sign it, she said. We'll notarize it tomorrow. I scanned it once. You made this yourselves. I used a service, she said defensively. It's valid. It removes all charitable provisions, I noted. They don't need your money. I looked at Andrew. Is this what you want? He hesitated, then nodded. It's fair. Fair. I closed the document. I'll review it. You'll have an answer in 2 weeks. Her eyes narrowed. 1 week. 2. She studied me, calculating. Fine. But if you don't sign, we go nuclear. I understand. As I walked away, I heard her voice rise behind me. Sign it, or you'll regret it. In my study, I called Rachel. They've given me their version. Good, she said. Now we know exactly what they expect. And exactly how little they'll read, I replied. She paused. You're sure about this? I've never been more certain. Because sometimes the only way to teach people the value of patience is to let them trap themselves. The next 10 days passed in a strange, artificial peace. Vanessa stopped her small cruelties. Meals reappeared on the table. The heat stayed on. My newspaper subscription mysteriously resumed. Andrew tried to make conversation again, as if friendliness might hurry my decision along. I played my part. I smiled. I nodded. I thanked them. Inside, I was counting commas. Every morning, I drove to Rachel's office before dawn traffic thickened the roads. We worked with the door closed, phone silenced, coffee growing cold between us. What they want, Rachel said on the first day, tapping Vanessa's amateur draft, is everything. Immediately. No friction. And what they deserve, I replied, is exactly that on paper. She arched an eyebrow, but not in practice. We began from the outside. Pages 1 and 2 were flawless bait. Clean language. Large font. Simple declarations. I hereby bequeath my entire estate, including my residence in Eugene, Oregon, appraised at approximately $950,000, along with all liquid and investment assets, totaling approximately $600,000, to my son, Andrew Caldwell, and his wife, Vanessa Caldwell, to be divided equally. No trusts, no visible strings, no charitable mentions. Rachel leaned back. If they stop reading here, she said, they'll think they've won. They will stop reading, I said. Vanessa already thinks legal documents exist to confirm her assumptions. We turned to the real work. Section 4. Conditions of inheritance. Legally permissible. Morally instructive. The house could not be sold, rented, transferred, or leveraged in any way for a period of 10 years following my death. 10 years. Long enough to sting. Short enough to be defensible. Annual charitable contributions of $20,000 indexed to inflation to the Eleanor Grace Caldwell Memorial Fund, supporting the Regional Food Bank and the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center Eleanor loved. Maintenance obligations. Documented upkeep. Annual reviews by the estate executor. Failure to comply with any condition triggered immediate forfeiture of the entire inheritance, redirecting all assets to the charitable trust. Rachel paused. This will cage them. That's the idea, I said. They want liquidity, freedom, indulgence. I'm giving them responsibility, patience, and memory. She studied me. And the witness clause? I smiled. Oregon allows beneficiaries to witness wills. Her eyes widened. They'll be attesting to your competence and surrendering their ability to contest it. We refined the language carefully. The first pages remained inviting. The later sections grew denser. Fonts slightly smaller. Clauses nested. Perfectly readable. Painfully ignored. By the 7th day, the document felt complete. 9 pages. Every word deliberate. Rachel reviewed it one final time. It's harsh, she said, but it's lawful and airtight. They threatened to erase my wife, I replied. This is restraint. On the 10th day, I signed it in her office. My hand was steady. Rachel notarized the document, filed copies in secure storage, and handed me the original in a leather portfolio. You ready? She asked. I've spent my life preparing for worse, I said. At home, Vanessa was waiting. She barely concealed her excitement. "You decided," she said. "Yes," I replied. "You were right. Family should come first." Her relief was immediate. Unfiltered. "We'll schedule a notary," she said. "Tomorrow." "I already have," I replied. "Jonathan Pierce. Highly regarded. Discreet." She checked her phone, scanning reviews, confidence blooming. The next 3 days were almost pleasant. Vanessa cooked. Andrew laughed. Plans were made aloud. Real estate agents. Bridge loans. Vacations. I listened quietly. On the morning of the signing, Vanessa dressed like victory. Andrew looked nervous but compliant. Jonathan's office smelled of polished wood and neutrality. He reviewed the document. 9 pages, he said calmly. "Everyone has read the full text." "Yes," Vanessa said too quickly. I signed first. Then Jonathan turned to them. "By signing here, you affirm that Mr. Caldwell is of sound mind and acting freely." Vanessa signed without hesitation. Andrew followed. The seal came down. Final. Outside, Vanessa exhaled like someone who had been holding her breath for months. "It's done," she said. "You made the right choice." "I'm sure I did," I replied. That night, I poured myself a drink and listened as Vanessa bragged on the phone. "No conditions," she laughed. "Everything's ours." I smiled into the glass. The trap only works when the door closes behind you. Vanessa didn't even wait a full day. The morning after the signing, she swept into the kitchen dressed like she was heading to a boardroom instead of a local bank. "I'm going downtown," she announced, grabbing her keys. "We're going to talk options." "Options?" I asked, folding my newspaper. "Loans. Lines of credit. Andrew's startup needs momentum, and there's no reason to sit on assets when they're essentially ours." Essentially. I didn't correct her. Andrew hovered near the doorway, coffee untouched. "Maybe we should slow down," he said. "Just until dash." "Until what?" Vanessa snapped. "The paperwork is done. Everything's settled." She turned to me with a smile that tried very hard to look gracious. "No offense, Leonard, but banks understand estate planning. They know how this works." I wished her luck. She returned just after noon. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the hallway mirror. Her heels struck the floor like punctuation marks of rage as she stormed into the living room, papers clenched in her fist. "What did you do?" she demanded. I looked up calmly. "I'm reading." She thrust the papers toward me. "The bank wanted the full will. All of it, not just the first pages." I nodded. "That's standard." Her hand was shaking now. "It's 9 pages," she said. 9. And it's full of conditions. "Yes. 10 years before we can sell the house." 10. Her voice cracked. "And $20,000 every year to charities. That's $200,000. To Eleanor's causes," I said. "Yes. That's not what we agreed to." "We didn't agree to anything," I replied. "You demanded." I complied. Andrew appeared behind her, pale, holding his own copy. "Dad," he said quietly, "the bank said we can't leverage the property at all. Not for a loan. Not as collateral." "Correct," I said. "No sale. No transfer. No leverage." Vanessa stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. "You tricked us." "No," I said evenly. "You chose not to read. This is fraud. Fraud requires deception. You had the document. You signed it. You witnessed it." She flipped through pages desperately. "We'll contest it." "On what grounds?" She opened her mouth, then stopped. "You attested that I was a sound mind." "Contesting it would mean admitting you lied under oath." The color drained from her face. "You planned this." "I planned to protect myself." Andrew sank into a chair. "We're trapped. Only if you accept the inheritance," I said. "You're free to decline it." Vanessa let out a short, hysterical laugh. "Walk away from over $1 million? Are you insane?" "That's your choice," I replied. "Money with conditions, or freedom without it." She gripped the back of the sofa. "We'll find another lawyer." "Please do." She stormed upstairs, slamming doors, throwing objects. Andrew followed, helpless. That evening, I poured a drink and listened to her voice rise through the floorboards. "There has to be a loophole." "There isn't. I won't live here 10 years. "You don't have to," Andrew said weakly. "Then we lose everything." Silence. the sound of realization settling in. The next afternoon, Vanessa returned from a meeting with a prominent estate attorney. She didn't yell this time. She just stood in my doorway, exhausted. "He said it's unbreakable," she whispered. "He said we signed our rights away." "Yes," I replied. "He said the conditions are harsh, but legal." "Yes." She laughed hollow. "He said the only way out is to reject the inheritance." "That's correct." She slid down into a chair. "I underestimated you." "Yes," I said quietly. "You did." Andrew stood behind her, eyes downcast. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "you decide what matters more to you. Money or dignity." They didn't answer. They didn't need to. Greed has a sound when it realizes it's cornered. It's very quiet. Vanessa didn't sleep that night. Neither did Andrew. I know because the arguing never stopped. It bled through the walls in waves, sometimes sharp and cutting, sometimes low and vicious, like an animal pacing a cage. Accusations collided with counterarguments. Old resentments resurfaced, dusted off, and weaponized. Numbers were shouted like verdicts. 10 years, 20,000 annually. No sale, no leverage, no loophole. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening not with satisfaction but with a strange, hollow calm. The kind that comes when something you've feared your entire life finally arrives and reveals itself to be survivable. This wasn't victory. This was inevitability. For years, I had imagined this moment differently. I thought there would be shouting in my face, slammed doors, threats, ultimatums. I thought I'd feel vindicated, maybe even triumphant. Instead, there's only the sound of inevitability settling into bones that had never carried its weight before. At around 3 in the morning, Vanessa screamed something unintelligible, her voice breaking in the middle. Andrew responded quieter, slower reason trying desperately to outrun panic. I wondered briefly if this was how they had spoken about me when they thought I couldn't hear. When I was younger, when my future was still something they believed belonged to them. I turned onto my side and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I slept. The next morning arrived pale and gray, the house still holding the residue of the night before. The air felt stale, like it hadn't moved since the shouting stopped. Vanessa came downstairs just after 8. She wore the same clothes as the night before. Her makeup was smeared beneath her eyes, dark crescents that made her look bruised. Her hair was pulled back in a loose, careless, not the kind she never allowed herself in public. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs, gripping the banister like it might steady her. "We're seeing another lawyer," she said flatly. "One more." There was no threat in her voice, no drama, just fatigue. "Of course," I replied. "You should." She watched my face for some sign of resistance, anger, fear, anything that would give her leverage. When she found none, her jaw tightened. Andrew appeared behind her, already dressed, already bracing. His eyes flicked to mine and then away again. They left together this time. The front door closed with careful restraint, as if slamming it might break something fragile and irreplaceable. I spent the day exactly as I always had. I made coffee. I read. I worked through a stack of old papers I'd been meaning to organize for years. Outside, the world moved on without any regard for the crisis unfolding inside this house. Time didn't stop for ultimatums. They returned just before dusk. I heard the car in the driveway and knew instantly before they even stepped inside that nothing had gone their way. Andrew walked like a man carrying invisible weight. His shoulders sagged. His face looked older, lines deeper, eyes dulled by the slow realization that strategy had limits. Vanessa looked smaller, not physically, but in the way someone does when their sense of control collapses, like a balloon that's lost air without bursting. She dropped her bag on the floor and walked straight into my study without knocking. "He confirmed everything," she said. "Every clause, every condition." She swallowed hard. "He said if we challenge the will, we violate the respect provision and lose everything." "Yes," I said. "That was intentional." Her lips trembled. "He said the witnessing clause alone kills any incompetency claim." I nodded. She stared at me then, eyes wet, searching for something: remorse, hesitation, humanity. "You built a prison." "No," I replied. "I built a choice." She laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and humorless. A choice between being trapped here for a decade or walking away with nothing. Yes. Andrew stood behind her, silent until now. If we stay, he said quietly, we have to live here, pay the charities, maintain the house. No shortcuts. Yes. And if we leave, then everything goes to the trust. I finished. Immediately, Vanessa dropped into the chair opposite my desk like her legs had given out. We're ruined, she whispered. No, I said. You're restrained. She looked up sharply. You're enjoying this. I considered that carefully. The truth deserved precision. No, I said honestly. I'm finished being afraid. She pressed her hands to her face, fingers digging into her temples. We planned our lives around that money. That was your mistake. She turned to Andrew, desperation breaking through her composure. We can't start over. You can, I said. You just don't want to. Andrew rubbed his temples. If we stay, he said, we're stuck watching him live his life while we wait. That's what patience feels like, I replied. Vanessa stood abruptly. I hope you live forever, she said venomously. I hope you make it to 100. If I do, I said calmly, you'll be the same age I am now. The words landed with precision. She froze. The math worked its way through her expression shock, giving way to understanding curdling into dread. She turned away, pacing. There has to be another angle. There isn't. She spun back. What if we refuse the charities? Miss a payment. Then the inheritance is forfeited. What if we sell anyway? Same outcome. What if she hesitated. What if you die sooner than expected? I raised an eyebrow. Then the 10-year clock starts then. Andrew flinched. Don't say that, he muttered. Vanessa collapsed back into the chair. This isn't fair. I leaned forward, folding my hands. Fair was the original will. You rejected it. She covered her mouth, breathing unevenly. You won. No, I said softly. I protected myself. Andrew looked at me, then not as a son. Not as an obstacle, but as a man reckoning with consequences he'd helped create. She'll never forgive this, he said. I'm not asking her to. Silence settled, thick and heavy. Finally, Vanessa stood. We're staying, she said flatly. We don't have a choice. You always have a choice, I replied. You're choosing money over freedom. She didn't argue. She couldn't. As they left the study, I heard her whisper to Andrew. We'll endure it. 10 years. Then we're free. I didn't correct her. Endurance changes people. Sometimes it teaches them something they never wanted to learn. That night, the house was quiet again. Not tense. Resigned. I sat alone in my study, the sign will locked safely away, and felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Peace. Not because they were suffering, but because I was no longer being erased. Vanessa made one final attempt. It happened 3 days later, just before noon, when the light had that thin, almost surgical clarity that arrives only in late morning. The kind of light that exposes rather than flatters. The sky was too blue for comfort and unbroken expanse that offered no distraction, no mercy. No clouds to soften anything. No shadows long enough to hide in. I had always noticed that kind of light more since Eleanor died. It reminded me of hospital corridors, of the way truth behaves when it believes it won't be contradicted. I was in the garden, trimming back the ivy Eleanor had planted years ago, the kind that spreads quietly when you aren't paying attention. It had crept up the trellis and begun testing the windowsill, thin tendrils exploring mortar lines, curling with patient confidence. Eleanor had loved ivy, said it made a house look rooted, as though it had decided to stay, as though it had claimed time. She used to say a house should look like it belonged to the land beneath it, not just the people inside. She believed in continuity, in staying put long enough for the place to learn you. She'd been right, of course, but even ivy needed boundaries. Left unchecked, it didn't beautify. It claimed, it pried, it found the smallest weakness and widened it over years, not with force, but with persistence. A lesson Eleanor understood better than most, and one she would have appreciated the irony of now. I was cutting carefully, methodically, enjoying the small resistance of the stems, the quiet certainty of each snip. There was comfort in that rhythm, a beginning, a middle, an end, cause and effect, something increasingly rare inside the house. That was when I heard Vanessa's heels clicking across the back patio. Sharp, deliberate, each step evenly spaced, as if measured against an internal metronome. The sound carried with it intention, resolve, rehearsal. The sound of someone who had practiced what they were about to say, possibly in front of a mirror, possibly in the car on the drive over, possibly all night while pretending to sleep beside my son. She didn't announce herself. She didn't clear her throat. She wanted me to hear her coming, to look up, to brace. I didn't. I clipped another strand of ivy and dropped it into the basket at my feet. She stopped a few feet away. I could feel her there before I saw her. The way tension compresses air, the way certain people alter a space simply by occupying it. Arms crossed tightly over her chest, jaw set, chin slightly raised. It was the posture she adopted when she believed reason was on her side and only needed to be explained clearly enough. "I met with Jonathan Pierce again," she said. Her voice was controlled, almost neutral, too neutral. I didn't respond immediately. Let the shears close once more. Let the silence stretch just long enough to be intentional, but not rude. "I see," I said at last. She waited, perhaps expecting me to turn toward her. When I didn't, she continued. "He confirmed there's no procedural defect, no ambiguity, no leverage." I nodded, though she couldn't see it. "Yes," I said calmly. "He's thorough." That irritated her. I could tell by the way she exhaled sharply through her nose. Vanessa did not like competence when it worked against her. She preferred errors, gaps, loopholes, the possibility that something essential had been overlooked. She paced once, heels clicking again, then stopped directly in my line of sight, forcing the issue. I could feel her gaze now measuring, weighing, recalibrating. He also said something else. The ivy resisted slightly as I cut it back. Tougher than it looked. Old growth. Established. "What was that?" I asked. He said the document reflects intent. Clear intent. She swallowed. He said courts respect that. "They do," I replied. That was when her composure fractured, not all at once, but enough for me to see the fault lines beneath the surface. The practice calm slipped. Her mouth twisted into a short laugh that didn't reach her eyes, that curdled into something dangerously close to a sob before she caught it and smothered it. "You know what he asked me?" she said. I straightened slowly then, my knees protesting as they always did now. Age announces itself, not with drama, but with reminders, with limits. I finally looked at her. Her eyes were bright, but not with tears yet, with effort, with restraint. "What did you say?" I asked. Her voice dropped, losing its edge. "I didn't," she said. "Not really." She shifted her weight, the movement small but telling. "He asked why we didn't just accept the original will." I said nothing. She looked away then, out over the lawn, the flower beds, the house itself. I wondered what she saw when she looked at it. An asset, a future, a prize, or something closer to accusation. I didn't have an answer, she admitted. The silence stretched between us, heavy but clean. No need to fill it. He said greed is the fastest way to lose sympathy in probate court. I stood fully then, brushing dirt from my hands. The soil clung stubbornly beneath my nails. Eleanor used to tease me about that, said it meant I was doing something honest. "He's not wrong," I said. That did it. Her face tightened, the last of her carefully maintained control snapping into something rawer, sharper. "You could change it," she said suddenly. "You're still alive. You could amend it." "Yes," I agreed easily. "I could." She stepped closer, closing the distance she usually guarded so fiercely. Her perfume reached me, then expensive, restrained, chosen to suggest seriousness rather than indulgence. "So why won't you?" I met her eyes fully. Not angrily, not triumphantly, just honestly. "Because nothing you've done since moving into this house has shown me you'd respect what I leave behind." Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her nostrils flared. "I apologized," she said. "No," I replied gently. "You panicked." She flinched as though struck. That word panic cut closer to the truth than anything else I could have said. "This is punishment." "No," I said. "This is consequence." She turned away abruptly, pressing her hands to her temples, fingers digging into her hair as though trying to contain her thoughts physically. "I can't live like this for 10 years, she said. Her voice was tight now, fraying. "You don't have to." She spun back toward me. "You know we can't walk away." "That's your decision," I said evenly. "Not my burden." She stared at the ground, breathing hard, fighting herself more than me now. Vanessa had always believed conflict was something you won by pressing harder. She was learning, slowly and painfully, that some things only respond at a time. Inside the house, through the kitchen window, I could see Andrew standing there, watching. He didn't intervene. He rarely did. Andrew had always preferred observation to action, analysis to decision. It was one of the things that had once made him a good son and later, a dangerous one. He understood systems, processes, outcomes. What he struggled with was responsibility. When Vanessa finally spoke again, her voice was hollowed out. "You planned this from the beginning." I considered that accusation carefully. "I planned to defend myself once I understood the threat," I said. She nodded slowly, absorbing it. "I never thought you were capable of this. And I never thought you were capable of planning my removal," I replied. That landed hard. Her shoulders slumped, as though the last argument had finally drained out of her body, leaving nothing behind but gravity. That evening, they returned from Jonathan's office together. Andrew spoke first, his voice low, measured, stripped of its usual defensiveness. "We're accepting the terms," he said quietly. "All of them." Vanessa stood beside him, arms at her sides, her face carefully blank. "I'll set up the charity payments," she said flatly. "Automatic, so there's no mistake." "That would be wise," I replied. Silence filled the room. It wasn't the comfortable silence Eleanor and I had shared, the kind that felt like rest. This was something else, heavy, watchful, provisional, as though the house itself were waiting to see who would flinch first. Then Vanessa asked the question that mattered. "Are you happy now?" I shook my head. "I'm safe." She laughed then, bitter and sharp. "That's worse." Over the next few days, reality settled in. The real estate brochures disappeared from the counter. The spreadsheet vanished from the printer tray. The tone in the house changed, not warmer, but quieter. Conversations shortened. Doors closed more gently, as though sound itself had become suspect. Vanessa stopped making plans out loud. Andrew avoided eye contact, spending longer hours at work, coming home later and later, as though proximity might provoke consequence. One night, passing their door, I overheard her crying. "I just wanted security," she whispered. Andrew didn't answer. Security, I thought, built on someone else's death isn't security. It's a gamble. A week later, Jonathan called me. "She came back again," he said, "with another attorney." I sighed, and they asked if there was any room for mercy. I almost laughed. "And what did you tell them?" "That mercy belongs to the testator," he said, "and he appears quite certain." I thanked him and hung up. That night, Vanessa stood in my doorway one last time. "I hate what you've done," she said. "I know, but I hate what I've learned about myself more." That surprised me. She hesitated, then asked the question she had been circling since the beginning. "If we do everything right, if we endure, will you change it later?" I shook my head. "No." She nodded slowly. "Then I guess we'll learn." After she left, I sat alone in the living room, the house quiet except for the ticking clock Eleanor had loved. Greed always believes time belongs to it. It never does. Time belongs to those willing to wait. And for the first time since Eleanor passed, I felt like the house remembered who it belonged to. The house settled into a new rhythm after that. Not peace, not warmth, but reality. Vanessa stopped pretending altogether. There were no more forced smiles, no fake politeness layered over resentment. She moved through the house like someone serving out a sentence, efficient, clipped, silent. Andrew followed behind her, quieter than ever. They honored the will's terms quickly, not out of respect, but out of fear. Automatic transfers were set up for the Eleanor Grace Caldwell Memorial Fund. I received confirmation letters from the food bank and the wildlife center within weeks, both thanking the estate for its generosity. I read those letters slowly. Eleanor would have liked that part. The house maintenance binder appeared on the kitchen counter soon after. Invoices, receipts, inspection schedules. Vanessa handled it obsessively, terrified of making a single mistake that might cost her everything. The irony wasn't lost on me. For months, she'd treated this house like an obstacle, something temporary, something to be liquidated. Now it owned her. 10 years is a long time when you're forced to live inside a choice you didn't fully understand. The first holiday came quietly. Thanksgiving passed with minimal conversation. Vanessa cooked because she had to. Andrew ate because he was hungry. Jake was polite, confused by the tension he didn't yet have words for. He hugged me before bed that night. "Grandpa," he whispered, "are you staying?" I held him a moment longer than usual. "Yes," I said, "I'm staying." He smiled and ran off, satisfied. Vanessa watched from the hallway, something unreadable crossing her face. December brought rain and shorter days. The house creaked the way it always had, wood expanding and contracting with the cold. For the first time in months, I noticed Vanessa fixing things without being asked. Tightening a loose hinge, clearing the gutters, documenting everything. She wasn't doing it for me. She was doing it for the clock. The 10-year clock that would only start ticking after I was gone. I could feel the weight of that realization settling on her more heavily with each passing day. One evening, Andrew knocked on my study door. "Dad." "Yes." He stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind him. "I just wanted to say, I didn't think it would turn out like this." "No one ever does," I replied. He shifted his weight. "I should have stopped her. Earlier, before it went this far." "Yes," I said simply. He nodded, accepting it. "She talks about you like you're immortal," he added. "Like time is mocking her." I almost smiled. "I'm healthy," I said, "and stubborn." A dangerous combination. He managed a weak laugh. "I think she finally understands that." Weeks passed, then months. The house didn't feel hostile anymore. It felt resigned. Vanessa stopped talking about the future entirely. No vacations, no businesses, no escape plans, only compliance. One afternoon in early spring, she surprised me. She asked about Eleanor. Not in passing, not sarcastically, genuinely. "What was she like before she got sick?" she asked, standing awkwardly in the doorway. I considered refusing. Then I didn't. I told her about Eleanor's laugh, about how she cried at commercials, about the way she talked to plants like they could hear her. Vanessa listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded once and left. She never thanked me. But the next week, she volunteered at the Wildlife Center. Just once. It wasn't required by the will. That mattered. I didn't comment on it. Lessons land harder when you don't announce them. Summer came again. The maple tree Eleanor planted bloomed fully. Vanessa took photos documenting, always documenting, but this time I saw something else in her posture. Not greed, weariness. Living with consequences is exhausting. One evening, nearly a year after the will was signed, Vanessa stood in the kitchen holding a charity receipt. "You know," she said flatly, "if we mess up even once, it's all gone." "Yes." She stared at the paper. "All of it." "Yes." She exhaled slowly. "I used to think rules were for people without leverage. And now?" I asked. She hesitated. "Now I think rules are what protect people from themselves." That was the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get. And it was enough. Because this was never about revenge. It was about boundaries. About teaching a lesson no lecture could deliver. About reminding people that entitlement collapses the moment it meets patience, preparation, and law. On the anniversary of Eleanor's passing, I visited her grave alone. I told her everything. Not the anger, not the cruelty, just the outcome. "I think they're learning," I said quietly, slowly, painfully, but learning. The wind moved through the trees. I took that as approval. Back home, the house waited as it always had. Not a prize, not a burden, a responsibility. Vanessa and Andrew will likely inherit everything one day. If they endure, if they comply, if they grow, or they'll walk away. Either way, the outcome will reflect who they chose to become. And that's the real inheritance. Not money, not property, but consequence. Because in the end, the most dangerous thing you can do is assume an old man has nothing left to teach you, especially when he wrote the fine print.